What's the most terrifying confession from a drunk person? Story 1. There was this story that a college professor of one of my best friends had that, later told by one of his students at a party, got me right in the gut. So this professor is a medic, teaching medicine to one of my best friends. I've never talked to him, so I can't actually verify any of this, but having heard it a second time later by a completely different person, this time all sober, I'm kind of inclined to believe it. This professor also practiced medicine as a part of a program here in our country, roughly translated to Healthy Children, a program aimed to make general health checkups to children from low-income families that, in this country with mostly private health care, can't go to a normal hospital. One of his patients was a girl, aged around 3, that, other than some bruises near her pelvis, was completely fine, even energetic and cooperative with the medics. The professor took note of the bruises, but didn't follow up with them, just thinking they were from something normal, like a game she played or something, and he didn't want to insinuate to the family that he had suspicions of abuse without having more proper evidence. I think that to the 3rd weekly checkup, she didn't turn in. Instead, it was her grandma saying that she was fine, just out with her mother. Now standard procedure with a failing of getting the child to the checkup is sending the medical personnel to the home. And so they did. The child wasn't there, but the mother was. She said that the child was with her boyfriend, not the biological father in the least, and a person that didn't seem to have long-term commitment to that relationship. The medics, in between them, the professor, said that they were going to return the next day at a very specific hour, and they needed to be there. Next day came, and now none of them were there. In fact, nobody was at that home. It had been abandoned. Police took the case from there. They found the body of the 3-year-old buried in the backyard, dismembered. What happened, and was later found in an investigation, is that the boyfriend of the mother continuously, intimately abused the kid and had the mother of the child threatened for her life if she talked to the police. I don't know how the criminal case turned out in the end. Both times I heard the story, one where the narrator was drunk and I was somewhat tipsy, the second one, everybody hearing the other narrator completely sober. The names to identify the people in the story were fake, and I hadn't had the opportunity to talk to said professor, so I can't actually dig into the know, and it didn't get to the news either, so there's that. The professor told this story to his students as a lesson. Always dig in strange things that somebody doing a checkup has, especially if they're children. It doesn't matter if you need to apologize 1,000,000 times to angry parents that felt insulted for the insinuation of possible harassment. Those 1,000,000 apologies won't be nothing compared to the guilt that professor felt every day of his life for the 20-plus years since that happened, knowing he had the opportunity to do something, or at least start something that down the line could have changed the outcome. I can't exactly remember why this was brought up. I think somebody mentioned this professor was going to be theirs in a specific class, and a guy present that already had the class started talking about him, and eventually he insinuated the existence of a dark story with him, and morbid curiosity had us all, at least the first time. The second was just talking about this class in general and its importance. But what I do remember was that the student that said it to me talked about how he couldn't participate in that class for 20 minutes because he needed, at the time, control his tears. He said that just as tears rolled over not only from his eyes, but some of the other listeners too. Even if I'm not a medic nor I study it beyond reading some of my uncle's books, I took that story, as horrifying as it was, down to my core, And nowadays, every time that there's something that I know is going to get someone mad, but it needs to be done for the possibility of avoiding a really bad situation in the future, or just in general for the betterment of most, if not all, I'm the first one trying. And I have the patience of the whole world for anything that comes out, either a burst out or a shout out or whatever, thinking that even if not to the scale of this professor's story, I will do my best to learn from his mistakes. And I actually have learned quite a lot from this, to have a tone as calm and understanding as possible, and to phrase things even, if not perfectly, to the best of my ability, and backtracking if I made a mistake or if there's a misunderstanding. I've received laughs of disassociation, shouting, and emotional bursts out from stressed people, and I'll keep doing it for as long as I see myself fitted to do so. And if I consider myself not fitted, I'll try my best to find somebody that is, both in capability and willingness. Too long didn't read? A med student once told me the story of how his professor could have avoided the continuation of intimate abuse and unaliving of a 3-year-old if he questioned the family for her bruises in her pelvis, once told while drunk, once later while sober. That is a really horrific and a long story to start off this video. I think the one very saving grace about this is that this drunk person that confessed this wasn't directly responsible for these actions. I get that he realized that he needed to take it upon himself to act on the information, but I was expecting these stories to have like direct confessions of actions of these. And thank deity that this wasn't a direct result of him being drunk. Story 2. Background. I live with my elderly father. I'm practically bedbound due to horrific chronic migraines and vertigo, but he has a really bad back, enough to have an implanted pain control device, as well as Parkinson's. He does the cooking. The smell of cooking food makes me want to vomit, and he does a lot of the cleaning because all of the bending and quick turns makes me really dizzy and unsteady on my feet, even though bending is really hard on his bad back. I hate being so dependent at my age, but I'm doing the best I can. So he doesn't drink and hasn't in ages, but with Parkinson's, he sometimes has these states where he devolves to childlike behavior with belligerence and speaks with no filter, just like a drunk. One time during one of these fits, he was getting really angry with me for trying to help with something he couldn't do. I apologized for being useless. He got frustrated and said he hated that I couldn't do anything and hated taking care of me. He even hated me, and he couldn't wait until he was old and sick enough to be in a home so I'd have to take care of him, and he could get back at me for all of the time he spent caring for me, and he would do things willfully just to make it harder for me and be mean to me. My mom, his ex, and my counselor both said that he didn't mean what he said, but it hurt to hear those things from the person I love most in the world. He didn't remember any of it, which is both good and bad, I guess. It's good for him to not have to remember saying those things if he didn't really mean them, but bad because we can't discuss it. And it's been over a year, and I still have it pop up into my head at times, because even if they said it wasn't true, I'm sure it was seated in truth. That's got to be a harsh kind of statement to have lodged in your head, and to be unsure if it's true or not. What do you think? Do you think this person meant what he said in this fit of his? Was it just said something out of frustration? Or was there actual hatred there? Story 3. I once read a book by a German lawyer who talked about getting away with unaliving. It was like 12 real-life stories of how people got away or almost got away with it. One of them would have gotten away with it if it weren't for these meddling kids. There were no kids involved. He was boasting with it. And the first one of these stories was the story that was the inspiration for the book. He met a guy at a bar, and they talked about the topic, and the guy said that he was on a cruise ship with his wife to fix their unhappy marriage. One night she got drunk at the bar, and he had to bring her up into the cabin where she told him that she kept on cheating on him for almost their whole marriage. So he threw her out the balcony into the ocean. He then went back to the bar, ordered a drink, apologized for her behavior, and after an hour or two got back up in the cabin only to find it empty. So he went around the boat and asked if people saw his wife, unconcerned at first, and then acted more concerned as the day went on. They searched for her and obviously didn't find her, as falling from a cruise ship balcony into the ocean at night is pretty much a unaliving sentence. After the cruise was over, the man got on land and was awaited by two of the people in the cruise company. Apparently, expiring on a cruise ship happens now and then, and even unaliving is pretty hard to prove there, so they offered to silence him with money. He got 2 million euros and a divorce, which is a pretty good deal. Obviously, the author couldn't prove if that story actually happened, but it was a good story to begin the book because unaliving people on cruise ships and getting away with it seems to be actually pretty easy. I'm actually curious about the narrator's frame of mind in this. The way that person said that last sentence, getting away with it seems to be actually pretty easy, sounds like he's contemplating some plans of his own, which I hope he isn't doing. But I kind of feel for the person that he couldn't remember what he did. Did he remember it after he came to, after he had gotten sober? It's probably a pretty chilling memory to have that he can't share with anyone else to try and get past those feelings. Story 4. Mine wasn't terrifying per se. I had a roommate who had two main things. 1, she had epilepsy and had constant seizures. 2, she was a party animal and went on constant benders. Her professional life was okay, but everything regarding her personal life was a complete mess. One night, she and her friends got really drunk at home, so my then boyfriend and I couldn't sleep. At some point of the night, she started crying about how she didn't like anything about her life and went on a rant about all the specific things she hated. The following morning, I let her know that I heard her, calmly told her she needed a psychologist, and also talked about my own experiences with noise and trauma. So she disappears for a few months and then comes back. She looks a lot better, and she starts talking about how she got professional help. Her mom is caring for her, and how she went to a doctor only to discover most of her constant seizures were actually panic attacks. Because of alcoholism. Story 5. A coworker told me he had gone to a party and had quite a lot to drink. He was driving home and in a moment of clarity decided he shouldn't be driving. He pulled into a parking lot, shut his car off, and went to sleep. He was awakened by a police officer knocking on his window. He told the officer the truth, that he had been drinking and decided to pull over. The cop had him get out of the car. Seeing a nearby police cruiser, he began walking toward it, expecting he was going to be arrested. The cop stopped him and pointed to the building he had parked next to. He had parked in the parking lot of the local police department. Because he had stopped driving and had been honest with the police, they let him sleep it off on a couch and left the following morning. Story 6. I had a friend who I used to have an intimate history with in the past. Nothing physical, mostly exchanging nudes and, sex texting. Started talking to me again with her husband next to her. I'd been cool with both for a while, and she invited me to their place to smoke and drink. Without the explicit details, because a lot happened so fast, she blurts out, "Threesome?" So loud I think the neighbors heard, and me and her husband shared a similar disgusted look. Of course, the night was ruined after that, but it dawned on me that I was interested in how that would work and messaged her the day after. I expressed my enthusiasm to make it work with everybody being aware and comfortable with it, but she basically was trying to gaslight me, saying things like, "I wasn't trying to turn you on," or "Threesome? I have no idea what you're talking about." And yeah, I've shared this with friends, and they all agreed she's dumb. What do you think? Do you think she didn't get the reaction she was expecting and is playing it all off? Or was she so drunk she actually doesn't remember bringing this subject up? I'm kind of 50-50 on this. It could be either one. I kind of leaning more towards she didn't get the right response, so she's trying to play it off. What do you think? Story 7. Not terrifying, just sad. I worked at a bar for over a year, and there was this dude, Todd, that came in all the time. I'm pretty sure he didn't even go home. He just came straight from work to the bar. Todd would tell us all the time about how much he hated his wife. I heard him say a lot of bad and depressing stuff, but the one that stuck with me was he said that if the two of them had to drive somewhere and the trip was longer than 15 minutes or so, then she would sit in the back. She wouldn't sit up front with him, and they wouldn't even talk to each other. I always thought it was really sad that a married couple hated each other so much that they couldn't even sit next to each other in a car. Story 8. I think this is kind of sad, as this is just dominant masculine intimacy. If it was the other way around and she was offering two guys really matter to come do her, but also the bit of choking, hair pulling, slap her a bit, aka abusing, this would all be fine and would most likely happen. As masochistic submissiveness is the default female intimacy, scientifically studies done on this, and is also my type of intimacy, by the way, one intimacy is demonized while the other is totally accepted. Need a dominator to dominate a submissive. We're both jigsaw puzzles that connect with each other in this yin-yang thing, but only one is demonized and hated extensively when it's what women want. Now, I do get the perspective of the friend, and he could have just handled it with more consent in mind and just been open with them both about it and not tried to make it a drunken deceit thing. But then again, as I've said, male intimacy is demonized, so it leads to men having to hide it. Story 9. There comes a time when you need to stop the cycle and take responsibility for your actions. As a person who was intimately violated by my closest family member, who later became a horse addict after finishing college and ended up homeless and doing nonviolent crimes to support the habit, a point came across where I realized I'd self-medicated instead of therapy, which, oh my deity, helps people if you've got a good therapist. My opinion, without writing an article, there are things we must all face. And it's okay to ask for help, even without anyone you know finding out. Peace, and remember, the bad cycles have to stop with one person. Also know that you are loved. Not Jesus-y, or yeah, if that's your thing, but people you may not even remember look up to you. Don't let ego ruin you. Is it me, or are we not getting some context here? It sounds like this person is trying to respond to a story that has not been read yet, or it's not part of this video. And also, it's kind of giving me another white boy with a podcast kind of vibes here. What do you think? Story 10. In college, an athletic, green-eyed, red-headed, freckle-free, my absolute type friend of mine confessed to me at a party that she hated her boyfriend and her situation and wanted to smash me to get rid of him. She had a body built for sin, and I desperately wanted to do it. But even with so many drinks in me, the bro code, it's a real thing, applied, and I had to decline. Still earned me a punch in the face when she broke up with her boyfriend and told him I'd smashed her anyway. Once I explained that she was a psycho and had lied to him, he calmed down. I honestly think that if I'd actually done it, he would still have settled for one punch, but I'll never know for sure. I don't regret it, most days, because she was a psycho. Story 11. My mom was an alcoholic. One night she confessed how her mom, my grandmother, perished. Even though I've never met her, she was always brought up by my mom, and once said that on a Friday, She leaving my mom's old house after visiting her granddaughter, my older sister. My grandmother was going to a friend's house for a bit, but no one knew what she was doing during the weekend. But my mom was called to the police station Monday morning. It was about identifying my grandmother's body. It turns out her body was found face down in a water tank, and lots of substances and alcohol were found in her system. My mom never knew if it was accidental self-termination or unaliving, and my mother was a teen mom when she perished. She was only 45, and when my mom died when she was 45 too, and it was one of her fears to perish at that age. It was a sad confession and heartbreaking when I remember that one of her fears happened. It was the first and only time I heard how she even passed from my mom. Story 12. I have something similar, though not a confession, just a messed up story. I was at a bachelor party for my cousin's best friend. Of course, there were strippers, which was cool and all, but about 3/4 through the night, I look over at this row of 3 chairs the strippers had set up in a dark hallway to give lap dances, and there's the bachelor, stripper upside down, with her hoo-ha in his face, and he is eating like it's a Vegas buffet. But it doesn't end there. About 20 minutes later, I see the bachelor with the head stripper, I'm assuming she was because she was telling the other ones what to do, outside a bathroom arguing. All I hear is her saying, "I just worked my butt off on you for 20 minutes, and all you've got is $200? I guess he was smashing her in the bathroom. After all that, after everyone left, me, the bachelor, and my cousin got in the car, and this dude suggested driving downtown to get oral spicy time from paid spicy companions. My cousin and I were like, yeah, sure, bro, we'll get right on that. He passed out 5 minutes later in the car, and we dropped him off to his fiancée. I couldn't even look in her eyes, having witnessed what I'd seen and heard early that night. Story 13. I often have secrets I really want to tell people, but can't bring myself to tell normally. The main reason I get drunk is in the hopes that it'll get me to slip up and tell people by accident. Nothing on the level of this video, usually just stuff like being in debt or failing exams. For some reason, I'm just unable to ask for help when sober. Though even when drunk, I often fail to leak the actual secret that I'm asking for help with. Notably, I'm able to tell these secrets to some people just fine, just not people that are actually able to help me. My problem seems to be entirely with asking for help. Sometimes, when I've really needed help, and therefore been desperate to ask for it, I've caused people that know me to be concerned that I may be an alcoholic due to me drinking lots and often in attempts to get drunk and accidentally tell them. Thankfully, this turns out not to be the case, because the moment I get the help I'm seeking out, I'm able to get sober for months at a time until I land myself in the next problem that forces me to seek out help. Story 4. My brother told me that this time he went to a house party, he was a little drunk, but his friend was absolutely smashed. Well, he tried to make his buddy drink water and sleep it off, but he told my brother, "Look, you're really cute and all, but I have a girlfriend, and I'd rather do it in a bed anyway." Not really horrifying, but it threw my brother for a loop, because he found out his best friend thought he was smashable if he was single. Story 15. My girlfriend, just 3 hours after it happened, on her birthday while we were on vacation in Lithuania. Her beloved stepfather and 3 of his telco technician colleagues just drove on a landmine. He is currently the sole survivor. Driver decapitated by pieces of car, and the passenger behind him looked like ground meat. I've paid for his surgeries. It went for over a month and was slightly expensive, as the company refused to pay anything because they were working overtime due to lack of workforce in the Ukraine. Doctors gave him it would be a miracle chance for survival, but he's back at work, and I can tell him when he calls once in a while. Looking forward to seeing him in person when it's safe to go there. Sorry for my broken English. Czech is my native language. Story 16. My dad's very good friend recently perished of a motor accident. My dad is not an alcoholic, but when something like this happens, you don't want anything else but drink. When they got him home around 1 a.m., I was pretending that I was asleep, and I overheard that my grandma was unalived by my grandpa who was mentally ill. I was 14 when I heard this. Now I'm 15, but it's still hard to accept. Story 17. Met a girl I knew from high school, and we were 2 of 5 people at a house party. She said despite attending a private Christian school, she didn't really believe in God and felt like it was just some conspiracy. It hurt hearing that. I wanted to press her to have a conversation about it. I didn't because I doubted it'd be meaningful given her drunken state. Story 18. My mother told me I would have been disowned if my husband wasn't white. He is. It just so happened to be that way. I had another boy I liked too, but he left the school as he was older than me by a year, and he was black. That was the first of many times her racism came out to play.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.